Well, hello. Guys, always fun to see you. Want to start, as we do every single week, want to say hello to our different campuses. So to those of you who are in Kenosha, those of you who are at our Racine campus, online campus, we welcome all of you. And our weekends on Wednesday service, we welcome all of you. So there you go, the energy as usual. Now, before we get started today, because we are jumping right in, I do want to let you know two things. Number one, this is the last week that you have to sign up for groups. All right, so groups launch next week. And if you've not signed up for a group, you need to go to greatlakechurch.com/groups. All right, you can also swing by the info table, grab a catalog. But this is how we get to know each other around here, because on a Wednesday evening or a Sunday morning, it's just not that feasible to get to know other people. All right, so groups last for about 8 weeks and gives you opportunity to connect. But what happens at most of them is they discuss what we talk about at the service. And then there are other groups that are mission focused and other groups that maybe do a study on marriage or something like that. But you can look through the catalog. And then next week, along with groups launching, I want to let you know we are starting a brand new series called Hero Maker. All right, great series to invite your friends to. And the whole premise of Hero Maker is that all of us go through life at some level being taught that you need to be the hero. And we're kind of from just very early on in life trained to think, man, someday I can be the hero in this or the hero in that. But most of us have never even considered what it looks like to be a hero maker. And so that's what that series is about. But for today, it's a good time. It's a good thing you joined us, because we are wrapping up a series that we've been in for several weeks called Staying in Love. All right, and the premise of this series is very simple. Falling in love is easy, but staying in love is hard work. Okay, falling in love, that's the easy part. Because when we are dating, when we are trying to get into a relationship, we always put our best foot forward, right? I'm going to let you see the best parts of me. It's kind of like we're marketers, and we are advertising ourselves, because we know that when we're dating, if this person doesn't like what they see and doesn't like how we treat them, and they can pretty much just press the eject button, right? And see ya, boom, gone. So we're always doing our best to put our, best foot forward. I mean, the truth is, if we were going to be realistic about ourselves, like on online profiles, every dude would pretty much put the same thing. You got to love frozen pizza, PlayStation 3, and my mom's basement. I mean, if we were going to be honest, right, we're just going to put it out there, that's what it is. And I was looking through some dating profiles this past week, and probably my favorite one that I came across was on OkCupid. This dude, I don't know, to put the word creepy, I don't know what I would say, but here's what his profile says. His name is I Won't Murder You. Okay, I won't murder you. His summary: I'm a fun-loving guy and a self-starter who has absolutely no interest in committing murder. I'm looking for love, companionship, or just that one lovely evening. And rest assured that that one lovely evening will absolutely end with you back at your house, safe and sound. Let me take you into my magical world of not murdering anyone ever for any reason. And then when he says what he's going to do with his life, he says, I'll tell you right up front, certainly not murdering anyone, least of all you. Beyond that, mostly digging. So if any lady's going to take a chance on this guy, they're either creepy themselves, a little risk taker, or whatever. But falling in love, it's easy. Staying in love is hard work. Communication, that's hard work. Sacrifice, hard work. Learning to apologize, learning to forgive, hard work. Parenting, hard work. Staying committed to a budget that we agreed upon, hard work. Trying to figure out what a healthy sex life looks like, that's hard work, right? Because you got two individuals with two different personalities trying to come together. And most dudes, when we get married, there's this idealistic thing in our mind. It's like, dude, it's going to be sex every night, I swear. I swear. And they never really lose that ambition, which is why guys can be married 30 and 40 years and everything still turns into some sort of sexual comment. So, honey, can you please turn on the light? Oh, I'll turn on your light. I mean, isn't this true, guys? It's like, hey, baby, would you mind getting oil changed in my car? Oh, I'll change the oil on your car, all right. Can you put some, my butter on the bread here? Oh, I'll put butter on your bread. You got that right. I mean, guys are notorious for this. And the reality is we're two very separate people, and just trying to blend our lives and our backgrounds, all of that is hard work. Now, even if you work really, really hard at the relationship and you give it everything you have, it's still possible for a relationship to move from difficult or challenging or boring or annoying or disappointing. It's still possible, as much work as you give it, to move from that kind of category into toxic and downright, devastating. And for those of you who your relationship has gotten there, you're in a toxic relationship, you're in a relationship that there's been a lot of devastation taking place, I'm going to talk very candidly to you as we wrap up this series. Because when your relationship is there, it is time for a renovation. And nothing says renovation like HGTV. Right? Because if you watch HGTV, every episode and every show and everything that's featured is pretty much the same thing. You got a couple, they look at 3 homes, they choose one of them, they fix it up, and they live happily ever after. Now, does anybody know the show? It's not on anymore, but really brought HGTV to its peak. This was about a year ago, they stopped running episodes. Fixer Upper. All right, how many of you seen this show? Different campuses, right? Fixer Upper. All right, it hasn't been a new episode in a year or so. But if you've ever seen the show, Chip, the co-host, right, he co-hosts it with his wife, he always looked forward to a specific day in fixing things up. What was that day called? Yeah, Demo Day. Absolutely, right? That was the day of breaking cabinets and tearing down walls and removing old stuff. And so I'm just going to tell you this. If your marriage is in a bad place, if it's become toxic and if it's become devastating, and I know some of you are thinking, this is the only time he puts on work gloves, I guarantee it, right? But if it's become toxic and devastating, it is important that we have a demo day or a demo week, and in some of us, a couple demo months or even a demo year. And so we're going to talk about that today. But before we talk about that, before we talk about what it's going to take to remodel or redo our relationship, I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that most marriages do not become toxic because of a mean-spirited person. Our relationships don't go south because one of us is evil, right? Despite what you think, your spouse is not the spawn of Satan. Okay, it's just, the reality is that the reason good relationships go bad is because we're human. And there's several different reasons. I'll just go through them quickly. One of the reasons good relationships go bad is because of ignorance. Right? Most of us, when we get married, we have very few relationship tools. So we've never really learned how to communicate with another person other than our mom. Right? We've never really had to work through apologizing and forgiveness. We've never had to try to blend all of our life with the life of someone else. And so, man, that makes it very, very difficult. And a lot of people, when we get married, it's all idealistic, right? We think we're going to be up every night churning our own butter and, making clothes out of curtains and that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, I got this fantasy world out there somewhere. We're going to see eye to eye on everything. We're going to write and sing our own songs. But ignorance can lead to a very destructive relationship because along with ignorance comes a lot of disillusionment and a lot of disappointment. Now, another reason that relationships become toxic or destructive is because of past hurts. We got mommy issues and daddy issues. We got relationship issues that go all the way back to middle school or high school when we felt betrayed or rejected or ugly, and those insecurities are there, right? And then all of us, we have hurts that we just acquire in life because of failures that we've experienced and things that we've just become cynical towards. We've seen so much. And you can imagine this. I mean, I don't think it takes a lot of brain cells to realize that unhealed hurts make it almost impossible to have intimacy and closeness because the whole idea of intimacy means you have an open heart. You're able to share all of you with all of them. Another reason that relationships become toxic, again, it's not because we're evil people, but because of negative influences in our life. Things like addiction and gossip and negativity and even adultery seem to run in groups. I promise you this, regardless of how you want to live your life, it is easy to find a group of people, to find a network of friends who will encourage you to do whatever you're doing. This is why the Apostle Paul warns us. He says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good character. Our friends determine the direction and quality of our life. And I've said this many different times. You become the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. It's just true. You start thinking like one another, you start talking like one another, and acting like one another. And so if the biggest influences in your life do not fuel a culture of love and respect in your relationship, if they're not working to help in that direction, I'm telling you, it can lead to a very toxic relationship without wanting to. It leads in that direction. Another reason that relationships become toxic and destructive over time is because of this human thing called defensiveness. As humans, we all have this tendency to put up walls if we think something's wrong in the relationship because we want to protect ourselves from getting hurt. And so when something is wrong, our tendency is not to, listen to our partner and tell me exactly how you feel. Right? Our tendency is not to validate, I see why you feel that way. Okay, that makes sense to me. That's not our tendency. Our tendency is to blame them, ignore them, make them feel stupid, and excuse our behavior. But you can imagine, defensiveness leads to destruction in a relationship because it communicates this idea, I'm right, you're wrong. Now, there's an endless list of issues that all of us deal with and are part of just being human that we could talk about today. But what I want you to see and want you to understand is your spouse, if they're destructive in any way towards you and towards the relationship, it truly, at the heart of the issue, usually isn't because they're evil. It's because they're human and there's unresolved issues. And the same with you. If you're the one causing destruction in your relationship, my guess is it's just because there's unresolved things happening inside of you. But the thing what I want to focus in on is this idea that if we don't deal with our issues, inevitably they're going to lead to a toxic and destructive relationship. And I want to paint for you a picture of what that looks like because you may not even know you're in something that really is toxic, okay? Or you may think you're in something toxic and the reality is you're just in a disappointing marriage. And it has nothing to do with toxic and destructive. And so I want to paint a picture for you so you know the difference between toxic and unhealthy. All right, now before I do that, let me just show you a picture here. I want to show you a picture of an x-ray. All right, this is an x-ray of lungs of someone's chest. Anybody want to tell me, is this x-ray a picture of healthy or unhealthy lungs? It's actually healthy. Yeah, pretty healthy. Got a little bit of, cloudiness going on, but that's actually a pretty healthy lung. Let me show you now a picture of some teeth. Are these healthy teeth or unhealthy teeth? They're actually healthy teeth. That's absolutely correct. But the reason I bring this up is if we're not trained on how to read x-rays, it's not easy to know is that healthy or unhealthy because we don't even really know what we're looking for. Right now, in fact, we have doctors who attend our church and we have dentists who attend our church, so maybe someone afterwards will say, actually, Dave, that was a little unhealthy. Okay. So, but we don't really know what we're looking for. Now, some things are obvious, right? If you've got a nail going through your head, that's pretty obvious. Right, you can look at this and say, yep, that's not right. If somebody swallows a pair of scissors, you know, okay, that's not supposed to be there. You don't have to be an expert for that. But what I want to do is paint a picture for you of what a toxic or destructive relationship looks like, all right? So that we can put on the work gloves and say, all right, we're going to start to work at chiseling away and demolishing this and having a redo in our relationship. A toxic relationship is a relationship filled with criticism. Ongoing, continual criticism. Now, to be clear, there is a difference between criticism and complaining. Every relationship is going to have complaining going on. People are just disappointed, right? A complaint is a negative comment about something you wish was different. A complaint is, I left for work today, you told me you were going to fill up the car with gas, and you forgot, and it's just very, very frustrating. I had to get gas, I was late for it, it's just very, very frustrating. That is a complaint. A criticism is attack on character. Why can't you remember anything? You told me you were going to fill up with the car with gas. You are a liar and an idiot. Right? That is a criticism. And there are lots of reasons for us as humans to become critical in a relationship. I get it. Like, it's just so frustrating sometimes. But none of the reasons we come up with are actually good for the relationship. This is why James, the half-brother, this is why King Solomon of Israel writes this. He says, the tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Your words and my words have a lot of power. There have been actually a lot of studies done on the ratio needed between negative and positive comments in order to have a healthy relationship. Okay, knowing that negative comments are going to happen, what is the actual ratio between, negative and positive? And there's lots of marriage experts out there. Dr. John Gottman is one of them. This guy's like a genius. But he says the magic ratio for healthy couples in communication is a 5-to-1 ratio. In other words, for every negative interaction during conflict, a stable and healthy and happy marriage has 5 or more positive interactions. And the reason that criticism is so harmful is because it leaves us with scars. It scars our memories, it scars our self-image. It makes your partner feel like they're completely incompetent. And so if you're looking at an X-ray, if you're looking at a picture of your marriage and it's filled with criticism, I want you to know that is more than unhealthy. That is toxic and it is destructive. Another sign of a toxic relationship is control and dominance. Now, most relationships are going to have a dominant partner. All right? In fact, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I'm guessing all of us, when we were growing up, if both of our parents lived in the house, we could think, oh, that parent was more dominant than the others, all right? Than the other one. A parent who makes most of the decisions and controls most of what happens in the relationship. That is very normal, but it's actually not healthy. In healthy relationships, there are two people working together. There are two people who've committed to work together for the caring of the relationship and the maturing of the relationship and the repairing of the relationship when things are broken. In fact, the word for that, and we've used it all throughout the series, is mutual submission. We're giving up some of our preferences, we're giving up some of our control, and we're working together. And so the key verse throughout the series has been submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. In order for that to happen, in order for there to be equality in marriage, both individuals have to sacrifice and give up their preferences on a regular basis. And if you're a naturally passive person, my guess is you do that pretty regularly in the relationship, just naturally. And if you've got a dominant personality, like my wife, that's actually not true, right? I've got a very dominant personality. If you've got a dominant personality, you have to constantly work against your personality and just how God's designed you in order to give up control and to give up some of the power so that you can work together in unison, so that there can be consensus and agreement on things like money and children and schedules and stuff needing to be done around the house. So passive people, you kind of need to step up, right? And dominant people, you kind of need to choose to step down. Otherwise, it's a toxic and destructive relationship. Another sign of a toxic and destructive relationship would be checking out. This is called emotional abandonment. Right? This is when your partner feels undesired and unwanted, devalued, unappreciated. It's when someone turns their heart away from the other person in a relationship. That is incredibly dangerous because all adultery starts with emotional abandonment, somebody turning their heart away. Another sign of a toxic relationship speaks for itself, right? Infidelity. Almost nothing is as painful as the betrayal of trust in a relationship. And someone who's on the receiving end of an affair will tell you, man, it just felt like my entire life just fell apart and was destroyed in a moment. Okay, in some ways, it's like a sinkhole. You have a couple and they built their life on something. And they put their energy and their time into it. They have friends together, right? They share friends and finances and values. They built this relationship where they find love and support and security. And when someone learns about the betrayal, in just a moment in time, it just feels like the entire ground opens up and swallows everything that has been built. And to them, it just feels like this just happened overnight. This just took a couple of days. In reality, the foundation was probably deteriorating for a while, right? Emotional abandonment was happening at a while. And since most of the time, someone doesn't realize an affair is taking place until it's actually revealed, often they just feel stupid. They're humiliated and angry. They're embarrassed. They're confused. And so obviously that's very toxic and destructive for a relationship. Let me just give you one more sign, and there's more than this, but these are some big ones here. Abuse is a sign that your relationship has become toxic. So when you're looking at the picture of your relationship and you're looking at the x-ray and you're kind of trying to study it, if there is any physical abuse, emotional abuse, if there's any sexual abuse going on, if there's verbal abuse taking place, let me just tell you, that is toxic. Now, in our culture, the word abuse is thrown around a whole lot. And so I think it's important for us to make a distinction between what's unhealthy, what's not good, and what's actually abusive. Okay? If there's a lot of fighting going on in the relationship, that's unhealthy, but that's not abuse. If there's disrespect happening, usually that's just unhealthy, it's not abuse. If you feel like your partner doesn't care, if you feel like maybe your partner doesn't want to be around you, that's not abuse. That's unhealthy, but that's not abuse. Abuse is control. Abuse is using words that demean and belittle the other person. Abuse is violence at any level. Okay, that's abuse. And regardless of what kind of abuse it is, abuse creates a culture of fear. I'm afraid of this person. And so obviously, abuse is destructive to a relationship. Now, the question that I want to spend the rest of our time trying to answer is, how do you respond to a destructive relationship? How do you find healing? Whether you're the person inflicting the pain or you're the recipient of the pain, how do you find healing? And regardless of whether you're the person causing destruction, and sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes it's both of us in the relationship. But if one just seems to be causing a lot more than the other person, regardless of where you stand, if you want healing, it starts with the posture of your heart. It starts with a humility and a brokenness. It starts with saying everything's not their problem, right? I've got to do something to fix this relationship. And so I want to speak first and foremost to those of you who are on the receiving end of a toxic relationship and you feel like there's abuse that's happening to you, right? You feel like your partner has just emotionally checked out and they've turned their heart away from you. You just feel like, man, this is not in a good place whatsoever. There's a lot of criticism towards me. I'm not talking about, once every couple of weeks. I'm talking about ongoing criticism. I can never do anything right. If you're on the receiving end, there's a couple things I'm going to encourage you to do. Number one, establish boundaries. Now, I was lighthearted last week, and I talked about my wife reading a book on boundaries, and I thought it was a horrible book. The reality is, it's a powerful book. And boundaries are a necessary part of life. And in most areas of life, our boundaries are just given to us, right? Property lines. For those of you who own a house, when you bought your house, it came with property lines. And all you have to do is look at a parcel map, right, of your community to know, oh, this is exactly what my property line looks like. And boundaries are necessary because what they do is they establish a space for you. You say, in this space, I have freedom. In this space, I also have responsibility. I have to take care of this space. And when you're operating within the boundaries of your property line, you should feel safe, you should feel respected because it's your property. If someone walks past the boundary, the property line, right, and they step onto your property and they start walking around, I don't care if it's the middle of the day. You should feel a little insecure about that. Like, what's going on? Why are they here? What do they want? Why are they in my backyard? I don't like this, right? It's the same as if you are in a conversation with someone and they're not respecting your personal space and there's no physical boundary, right? But and they're right there in your face. You're just like, I feel very uncomfortable right now. Will you please take a step back? No, a larger step back, right? Give me a little bit of space. That's absolutely fine and absolutely natural. The difference between healthy, happy relationships and toxic, dysfunctional ones are boundaries. And the thing about boundaries is nobody is going to give them to you. You have to establish them yourself. A boundary is something you establish for your own safety, your own security, and if it's crossed, there's just going to be natural consequences. Okay, so communication boundaries, time boundaries, financial boundaries, character boundaries, there's all types of boundaries. And they're not meant to be a punishment, so very simple. If you talk to me like that and continue to speak to me that way, I'm going to have to leave until you can settle down. If you lie to me, here's what's going to happen. If you continue to spend money on our credit card and keep racking up this debt, I don't want to do this, but we're going to have to separate our finances because I just can't live like that. Right? If you continue treating me that way, here's what's going to happen. And again, this isn't meant to be a threat. It's just meant to create space for a healthy, happy relationship. That's the first decision you need to make, is to establish boundaries. The second decision you need to make is to be as patient and gracious as possible. One of the great character traits of our God is his patience with us and his grace towards us. Let me just give you one example of this. In ancient Jewish history, God often communicated to the Jewish people through a prophet. Basically, God would speak to the prophet and say, I want you to speak this to my people. And often the people would listen to them and would respond to what God wanted them to do. But then there were times they would just ignore what the prophet was saying. And whenever they would ignore what the prophet would say, God would often have the prophet do something very dramatic to get his point across. In fact, one of the most extreme examples of this is found in the book of Hosea. Okay, God says to the prophet Hosea, my people are committing adultery against me. We're supposed to be in this loving relationship, but they have left me. They're serving other gods. They can't hear anything I'm trying to communicate to them. Therefore, this is what he says to the prophet. I want you to go and marry a prostitute by the name of Gomer. Now, I don't know why any prostitute would go by the name of Gomer, but apparently that was acceptable in Jewish culture, all right? And so, crazy story, God floods Hosea's heart with crazy amounts of love for Gomer. Just unwavering love for her. And this is unreal. He goes, he finds this prostitute, and he buys her out of prostitution. He has to pay a sum of money. He buys her out of prostitution. He brings her into his home. He establishes safety and provision and care. She's no longer viewed as a commodity. She's viewed as a soul. She's loved. She's respected. But then, Gomer leaves Hosea. She goes back into prostitution. And his heart is broken. He's devastated. And what does he do? He goes, he finds her, he brings her back, he brings her into safety, and he starts providing for her and caring for her and loving for her, valuing her as a person again. And what does she do? She runs off again. Hosea is heartbroken and grief-stricken. This is not a parable. This is not like a story that's in the Bible to make a point. No, this is historical stuff that God, a point that God made using one of his prophets. And so he's got tears running down his face, and he goes and he finds her again and he brings her back into safety. And God's message to the people of Israel is, my love for you is never ending. As many times as you leave me, as many times you walk away from me, I want you to know I still love you. I still accept you. And some of you need to hear that message today. God loves you deeply, regardless of what you've done. His grace, his patience with you is just never ending. And when we go through difficult seasons in our relationship, when we're in the winter of our relationship and things are cold, and it is the love of God toward us that is supposed to drive and fuel the decisions we make in the life that we live. Now, that doesn't mean every relationship has to stay together forever. And if you're in an abusive relationship, stick around. I actually think if you're in an abusive relationship that doesn't stop, you need to leave. I'm not saying divorce, but you need to leave until that stops. And I realize not every relationship is going to go the distance. But the posture of our heart is everything. It's saying, God, you love me so deeply. Now, please, I'm begging you, give me that kind of love toward the person I'm in a relationship with. Okay, that's the second decision we make. So we establish boundaries, we lead from a place of patience and grace, and then the third decision we need to make, if we're on the receiving end, is to work towards forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. Forgiveness is not pretending something didn't happen. Forgiveness is not ignoring the issue. Forgiveness is not saying there are no consequences. At its very core, forgiveness is saying, I am choosing to not repay you evil for evil. I'm not going to try to get you back for what you've done to me. Let me give you some quotes that I like about forgiveness that I think kind of summarize the importance of moving in that direction. I say moving because it's complicated in the long. When you forgive, you in no way change the past, but you sure do change the future. Here's another one. Not forgiving somebody is like drinking poison and hoping that the offender will get sick. Let me give you one more. Forgiveness doesn't make the other person right. It makes you free. So forgiveness is messy. It's complex. And whatever the issue is that you need to forgive your spouse over, the criticism, the affair, the hurt and pain, the emotional abandonment, whatever it is, my suggestion, because it's so hard and just so much emotion, is just to start by praying for your spouse. Not even with them, but for them. Because it's hard to hate somebody that you're praying for. And you're just saying, God, right now, I don't even like them. But I just pray that you would begin to do a work in their heart. I pray that you would bless them. I pray that, God, good things would happen to them. God, and as hard as it is, because the way hurt and bitterness becomes love and healing is finding a way to bless the person who hurt us. So if your relationship's destructive and you're on the receiving end, establish boundaries, be patient and gracious as possible, and number 3, work towards forgiveness. Again, that's if you're on the receiving end. Now, if you happen to be the one causing destruction, and you want healing, you want to do a remodel, you say, I can't live like this anymore, I've caused so much pain and so much hurt. Let me quickly walk through some decisions you need to make. Number 1, acknowledge the pain. Acknowledge the hurt you've caused. Do your best to see it and recognize it and feel it. Every year, there are students all over Germany who are required to visit one of the concentration camps. And the reason why this is part of their curriculum is that government leaders never want their people to forget about the atrocities committed against the Jews in World War II. They want them to feel it and sense it and know it. And despite their best efforts, right, despite the pictures and eyewitness accounts and physical buildings, there's still a very small percentage of Germans who deny the Holocaust ever happened, and they downplay the events of what took place. When we hurt someone deeply, it is tempting to minimize the pain because we're embarrassed, to deny that we said that or did that. But healing can only begin when we acknowledge the pain that we've caused. And after we've acknowledged the pain, if we truly want healing, the next decision we need to make is to accept responsibility. This means owning up to the damage I've caused. I've done this. And it doesn't mean the other person doesn't have their faults and the other person, doesn't have some things that they have to own. But I'm going to tell you, you want true healing? You can't be pointing out all that stuff. You need to recognize the damage that caused. You need to accept your responsibility and say, hey, I own this. James, the half-brother of Jesus, writes this. He says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. There's something about accepting responsibility and owning up to it. And part of truly owning the damage we've caused is when we apologize, refusing to use words like but or yet or however. Because in an apology, words like but and yet and however are like verbal erasers, right? They pretty much undo everything that came before it. I know I hurt you deeply and I'm sorry, but you've done the same thing to me. Just erases everything we said before it. You really want healing? You have to acknowledge the pain that you've caused. Number 2, accept the responsibility. And then number 3, you have to start taking steps toward change. Now, changing is crazy difficult. So if you say, well, I doubt my spouse will ever change, let me tell you, I agree. It's very, very difficult to change. But when we're desperate enough, it can happen. It's amazing what willpower can do. And there's just endless stories throughout history that we could talk about. In the late 1800s, gold was discovered in some deposits along the Klondike River in northwest Canada and in Alaska. And when word got out that gold was discovered, almost 100,000 people migrated to the Klondike region to become gold diggers. Many of them even quit their jobs. Now, here's what you need to know. The Klondike region is an incredibly remote area. The winters are extremely harsh. The terrain is unpredictable. And it took gold rushers 1 year to reach the Klondike. But a whole bunch of them did it. Despite the weather, despite the terrain, despite how unpredictable it was. Why'd they do it? Because when you want something bad enough, your human willpower can make it happen. And so the steps needed for changing are going to look different for all of us, right? Depending on our situation. But the difficulty involved is pretty similar because human nature just doesn't change like that. And so here's what I want you to hear. Regardless of the issue, it is possible to change. Regardless of the addiction, it is possible to change. It may feel impossible, but Jesus taught, and this is true to the character of God all throughout the scripture, with God, everything is possible. You can change. If the posture of your heart is broken and humble and you're willing to learn from others, you can change. You have to seek out wisdom. You have to seek out help. You have to seek out guidance from others. King Solomon of Israel wrote this. He said, whoever ignores instruction despises himself, but he who listens to reproof gains intelligence. Apologies and promises alone are not going to bring healing or restore trust in a relationship. There has to be observable change. There has to be steps forward. And every relationship is different. So I can't tell you exactly what those steps are. But if you've been in a destructive relationship for a while, just know it will take time to rebuild the relationship. It will take time to rebuild trust, to rebuild security and safety. And if the destruction done includes infidelity, it's going to take a whole lot of lights on and windows open type of living. Whole lot of just, here's my cell phone. Here's who I am. It's coming home early. It's doing whatever you can to restore trust. It's being more attentive and making your partner feel desirable. And I'll just end with this thought, because this is such a heavy issue. On our resource page of our website, if you were to just go to greatlakechurch.com, right on the home page, and clicked on current series, right? It brings up Staying in Love, this series. I put a book on there in the resource section called Not Just Friends. And if there has been an affair that has ruined your marriage in the last several months and you just kind of feel lost right now, I encourage you to read that book. Because the whole premise of the book is, man, you have to make some drastic decisions if you want to rebuild trust and find healing. Here's what I want you to hear, regardless of where your relationship is at. If you're in a difficult spot and you're in the winter season of a relationship, you can find healing. And we've seen it happen marriage after marriage after marriage, relationship after relationship after relationship. With God, all things are possible. Let me pray for you. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for relationships. And for those in a dark and difficult and challenging season, for those who've been through toxic and destructive type of patterns in the relationship in the recent months, I pray, God, as individuals and as couples leave today, you would give wisdom to know what to do and courage to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.